Nobody expected what Bumpy Johnson did when they insulted him. September 19, 1948. Sal the butcher Bonanno walks into Bumpy's restaurant with 6 armed soldiers. Then he says the one thing you never say to the godfather of Harlem. That racial slur echoed through Wells' restaurant like a gunshot. Everyone expected blood, expected Bumpy to explode, to pull his razor and turn that peaceful dinner into a massacre. That's exactly what Sal wanted. Justification for war. Instead, Bumpy did something that made Sal's blood run cold. He smiled. Not a friendly smile, the kind of smile a man gives you when he already knows how you're going to die. Then he stood up slowly, placed his napkin on the table, and said 6 words that would echo through organized crime forever. Your uncle will bury you tomorrow. What happened next didn't just end a confrontation. It changed the power structure of New York's underworld, made the 5 families call an emergency meeting, and proved that sometimes the deadliest weapon isn't made of steel, it's respect. Harlem in 1948 wasn't the neighborhood you see in movies. It was a kingdom, and Bumpy Johnson was its undisputed king. This was post-war America, where black soldiers had returned from fighting fascism overseas only to face Jim Crow at home, where talented musicians like Dizzy Gillespie and Charlie Parker were revolutionizing music but couldn't eat in most Manhattan restaurants, where a black man running $1 million operation was an impossibility in white America, except in Harlem. He didn't rule from some hidden fortress or underground bunker. He ruled from Wells' restaurant on 35th Street, a modest place with red leather booths, checkered tablecloths, and the smell of fried chicken hanging in the air like incense. But everyone who mattered in Harlem came through those doors. Musicians, preachers, numbers runners, politicians, even cops. They came because Wells' restaurant was neutral ground, sacred ground. You could have beef with someone on the street, but inside those walls you respected Bumpy's peace, because Bumpy Johnson controlled something everyone wanted: Harlem's numbers racket. The numbers game was simple but powerful. People bet nickels and dimes on 3-digit numbers. If your number hit, you could win 50 times your bet. For families making $7 a week, that nickel represented hope itself. A chance to buy your kid shoes, pay rent without begging, maybe even dream of something better. Bumpy didn't invent the numbers game. That genius belonged to Stephanie St. Clair, the brilliant Caribbean woman they called Madame Queen. She'd built an empire from nothing in the 1920s until Dutch Schultz and the Italian mob tried to destroy her. That's when she went to Bumpy in 1932. "Protect my operation," she told him, "and I'll make you the most powerful man in Harlem." Bumpy kept that promise. By 1948, he controlled every numbers bank in Harlem. Millions flowed through his hands annually. But Bumpy wasn't just another gangster with a gun. He was a strategist, a protector, a man who understood that real power came from the people, not from fear. When white landlords tried to evict black families, Bumpy made sure they found better deals elsewhere. When corrupt cops hassled local businesses, those cops discovered their patrol routes had mysteriously changed. When young men got arrested on trumped-up charges, bail money appeared like magic. And the Italians, they hated it. In their world, black men didn't run empires. They worked for them. They couldn't understand how one man had built such loyalty, such unwavering respect from an entire community. Frank Costello tried to negotiate. Bumpy refused. Vito Genovese sent threats. Bumpy ignored them. Joe Bonanno? He decided to send his nephew Sal the Butcher Bonanno to handle the Harlem problem once and for all. September 19th, 1948, 8:47 p.m. Wells' restaurant was packed. 40 people, maybe more. Dizzy Gillespie's Manteca played on the jukebox. Cigarette smoke curled toward the ceiling like ghosts of better times. Bumpy Johnson sat in his usual corner booth, the one with clear views of both doors and the kitchen. Always watching, always ready. His wife Mamie sat across from him, elegant and poised, the kind of woman who could silence a room just by walking into it. Bumpy was eating his usual ribeye steak, medium rare, cut with the same methodical precision he applied to everything. No wasted motion, no unnecessary drama. That's when the door opened. Sal Bonanno walked in first, 6'2", 230 pounds of muscle, wrapped in a tailored suit. They called him the Butcher because of what he'd done to a Brooklyn bookie who tried to skim money from a Bonanno card game. They found pieces of that man in 4 different boroughs. Behind Sal came his crew, 6 men, all armed. You could see the bulges under their jackets. They didn't try to hide it. That was the point. These weren't street thugs. These were professional killers. Tommy the Hook Castellano, who'd strangled 3 men with his bare hands in Brooklyn. Mickey 9 Lives. Romano, who'd survived 4 assassination attempts and killed everyone who tried. Johnny the Hammer DeMarco, fresh out of Sing Sing for armed robbery. And 3 younger soldiers, hungry to prove themselves, eager to spill blood for respect. Combined, they'd killed more men than most people had met. The restaurant noticed immediately. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Forks froze halfway to mouths. Even the jukebox seemed to get quieter, as if it sensed impending violence. Sal walked straight to Bumpy's table, didn't ask permission, didn't wait for an invitation, just stood there looking down at Bumpy like he was something stuck to the bottom of his shoe. "Bumpy Johnson," Sal said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "we need to talk." Bumpy didn't look up, just kept cutting his steak with slow, precise movements. The knife made soft scraping sounds against the porcelain plate. "I'm eating," Bumpy said quietly. Sal smiled, not a friendly smile, the kind of smile a bully gives you before taking your lunch money. "Yeah, I can see that. Nice restaurant you got here. Real quaint. But here's the thing, Bumpy, my Uncle Joe's got a problem. See, he thinks it's time for Harlem to get with the program. The numbers game, that's Italian business now. Always should have been." Bumpy still didn't look up, but Mamie did. She stared at Sal with the kind of cold contempt that could freeze blood. Sal continued, his voice growing louder, more confident. "So here's how this works. You step aside, hand over your operation. We'll give you a taste. 10% for your trouble. You can keep your little restaurant, play the big man for your people. But the real money, that stays with us, where it belongs." The entire restaurant held its breath. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Bumpy set down his knife, picked up his napkin, and dabbed the corners of his mouth. Then he looked up at Sal for the first time. His eyes were calm. Too calm. "That's a generous offer," Bumpy said evenly, "but I'm going to have to decline." Sal's smile disappeared. "You're making a mistake. I've made a lot of mistakes in my life. This ain't one of them." That's when Sal said it. The word. The slur. The one thing you never say to a black man in his own establishment, in front of his wife, in front of his people. "Listen." The fork Mamie was holding hit her plate with a sharp clink. The sound echoed like a gunshot. The entire restaurant went dead silent, not the kind of silence where people pause to listen, but the kind where everyone's deciding if they'll see tomorrow. Bumpy's expression didn't change, didn't flinch, didn't show anger, but everyone in that restaurant who knew him, everyone who understood what Bumpy Johnson was capable of, felt their blood turn to ice, because Bumpy Johnson, sitting perfectly still, was more dangerous than most men in motion. Bumpy's right hand moved slowly, reached into his vest pocket. Sal's 6 bodyguards tensed, hands moving toward their weapons, but Bumpy didn't pull a gun. He pulled out his razor, the same straight razor he'd carried since he was 16, the one he'd used to carve his reputation into the flesh of men who'd underestimated him. 7 inches of Sheffield steel, honed to an edge that could split a hair. He placed it gently on the table next to his steak knife. "You brought 6 men, Bumpy said quietly. His voice was so calm it was terrifying. 6 guns into my restaurant, and you think that makes you dangerous?" Sal tried to laugh it off. "I think it makes me smart." "No," Bumpy said. "It makes you ignorant." He stood up slowly, folded his napkin with the same precision he'd used to cut his steak, and placed it on the table. The 6 bodyguards reached for their weapons. Bumpy didn't even glance at them. "You see these people?" Bumpy said, gesturing to the 40 people in the restaurant. "You think they're just customers? Just innocent folks eating dinner?" Sal looked around. For the first time, uncertainty crept into his eyes. "Let me educate you, Sal." Bumpy pointed to a man by the door. "That's Thomas. I paid his daughter's hospital bills when she got pneumonia. That woman in the red dress? Her husband used to beat her. I made sure he stopped. That kid washing dishes in the back? I kept him out of jail when the cops tried to frame him for something he didn't do." He pointed to a table near the window. "Mrs. Washington there? I helped her buy her house when the bank tried to redline her out of the neighborhood. Mr. Coleman by the bar? I made sure his son got into Howard University when they tried to reject him for being black." Every face in this room has a story, Sal. And in every one of those stories, I was there when they needed help. Bumpy took a step closer. Sal's bodyguards raised their weapons, but Bumpy didn't stop. Every person in this restaurant owes me something. Not because I demanded it, because I earned it. You brought 6 guns into my house, Sal, but I've got 40 soldiers. They're just not wearing suits. Sal swallowed hard, glanced around the room again. The faces staring back at him weren't afraid. They were waiting for Bumpy's signal. Now, Bumpy said, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper, I'm going to give you a choice. You can apologize to my wife for using that word in her presence. Then you can walk out of here and tell your Uncle Joe that Harlem is not for sale. He picked up the razor, opened it slowly. The blade caught the light. Or you can find out why they call this Bumpy's Kingdom. Sal Bonanno had killed 17 men in his career. He'd broken bones, burned businesses, extorted millions. He wasn't used to being afraid, but standing in that restaurant, surrounded by 40 silent witnesses, staring into Bumpy Johnson's cold, calculating eyes, Sal Bonanno felt something he hadn't experienced since childhood. Terror, not the terror of physical pain, the terror of realizing you've miscalculated badly, and there's no way out. Bumpy smiled. That same knowing smile from earlier, the one that said he already knew how this story ended. Then Bumpy Johnson said 6 words. 6 words that would echo through the criminal underworld for decades. Your uncle will bury you tomorrow. The words hung in the air like smoke. Sal's face went pale. What? You heard me, Bumpy said calmly. You walked into my restaurant, disrespected me, disrespected my wife, disrespected my people, and you think you're walking out of here. Sal's bodyguards raised their guns fully now, all 6 aimed at Bumpy. Bumpy didn't even blink. You can shoot me, Bumpy said, and maybe you'll kill me, but the moment you pull those triggers, 40 people in this room will tear you apart. And even if you make it out, even if you somehow fight your way through that door, you think you're making it out of Harlem alive? He gestured toward the window. This is my city, Sal. Every block, every corner, every alley, you're already dead. You just don't know it yet. The silence was absolute. You could hear the clock on the wall ticking, the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. Someone's breath shallow and quick. Sal's hand was shaking. Just barely, but it was shaking. That's when Bumpy gave him the mercy he didn't deserve. Or, Bumpy said softly, you can apologize to my wife. Walk out of here, and never come back. Tell your uncle that if he wants Harlem, he can come himself, but he better bring more than 6 men. For 10 seconds, nobody moved. 10 seconds. That felt like 10 years. Then Sal Bonanno lowered his weapon. His crew looked at him in shock, but Sal wasn't looking at them. He was looking at Mame. Mrs. Johnson, Sal said, his voice barely audible. I apologize. That word, I shouldn't have said it. Mame didn't respond, just stared at him, with those cold, unforgiving eyes. Sal backed away slowly. His crew followed, weapons still out but lowered now. They moved toward the door like men walking away from a bomb they'd accidentally triggered. When Sal reached the door, he turned back one last time. This isn't over, Bumpy. Bumpy sat back down, picked up his fork, and cut another piece of steak. Yes, it is, Bumpy said without looking up. You just don't know it yet. Sal and his crew left. The door swung shut behind them. For a moment the restaurant stayed silent. Then someone started clapping. Slow at first, then faster. Then everyone was clapping, standing cheering. Bumpy Johnson had just stared down 6 armed mobsters, without firing a single shot. Mamie reached across the table and squeezed his hand. You didn't have to do that, she said softly. Yes, I did, Bumpy replied. Respect is everything. You lose that, you lose everything. Sal Bonanno left Harlem that night. He never came back. 3 days later, the 5 families held an emergency meeting in Manhattan. Joe Bonanno wanted revenge. He wanted Harlem. He wanted Bumpy Johnson dead. But Frank Costello, the man who really ran New York's underworld, said something that changed everything. Bumpy Johnson runs Harlem because Harlem wants him to. We try to take it by force. We start a war. We can't win. Not because we can't kill him, because we can't kill 40,000 people who'll die for him. Leave Harlem alone. And they did. From that night forward, the Italian mob never tried to take over Harlem's numbers game again. They made deals. They negotiated. They showed respect. Because Bumpy Johnson had taught them something they'd forgotten. Power isn't just about guns and money. It's about loyalty. It's about earning the respect of people who don't have to give it to you. The story of that night spread through New York's underworld like wildfire. Not just what Bumpy said, but how he'd said it. 6 words that carried more weight than any threat, any gun, any show of force. Professional killers who'd never backed down from anyone started crossing the street when they saw Bumpy coming, not out of fear, but out of respect. Sal Bonanno died in 1952. Heart attack. Some said natural causes. Others whispered that Bumpy had a long memory and patient methods. The truth was, Sal never recovered from that night in Wells' restaurant. He'd been broken, humiliated in front of witnesses. His reputation in the mob world never recovered. Nobody knows for sure what killed him, but everyone agreed on one thing. After facing Bumpy Johnson, Sal was never the same man. But here's what we do know. After that night in September 1948, nobody ever disrespected Bumpy Johnson in his own restaurant again. That razor he placed on the table, he never had to use it. Because sometimes the most dangerous weapon a man has isn't made of steel. It's the love of his people. September 19th, 1948. The night 6 words changed organized crime forever. The night Bumpy Johnson proved that dignity isn't negotiable, respect can't be bought, and sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stand up for what's right, even when you're outnumbered 6-1. Your uncle will bury you tomorrow. 6 words that made the mafia never return.